Today we're diving into the offerings described in Leviticus chapters 5 to 7. It's a deep and sometimes complex subject, but it's fascinating to see the significance these rituals had for the Israelites.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack here. These chapters focus heavily on sin offerings, trespass offerings, and peace offerings. It almost feels like a guidebook for moral and ceremonial purity.
Right, Leviticus 5 starts with a pretty strong premise. If someone sins, whether they've knowingly or unknowingly done something wrong, they have to confess and offer a sacrifice. It's all about acknowledging wrongdoing and making restitution.
Yeah, the idea of guilt and atonement runs throughout. In some ways, it's like a reset button for the soul. But what stands out to me is the idea of unintentional sin. The text says that even if you didn't know you'd sinned, you're still guilty. That seems harsh, right?
It does seem intense, but I think it underscores how serious the relationship between the people and God was meant to be. Ignorance of the law wasn't an excuse, and the solution, bringing an offering, was a way to restore that balance, that relationship.
That's a good point. So the offerings had layers to them. You had the sin offering, the trespass offering, and then we get to peace offerings in chapter 7, right?
Exactly. And each offering served a specific purpose. For instance, in chapter 6, we see that if someone sins against God or their neighbor, say through theft or false oaths, they are required to make restitution. That's a trespass offering. It's all about righting the wrong and restoring the balance.
And the interesting thing about the trespass offering is that it required more than just returning what was taken. You had to add a fifth part to the restitution. It's not just about getting things back to the way they were. It's about making things even more right than they were before.
That's such a crucial distinction. It's not just a get out of jail free card. The wrongdoer had to do more than just undo the harm. This idea of adding something extra is a way to show sincerity, a way to take responsibility in a fuller sense.
And speaking of responsibility, the offerings also came with a very specific protocol. Take the sin offering, for example. The priest had to follow a strict set of instructions for how to prepare the offering, especially the blood sprinkling and what should be eaten. It was almost like a spiritual science of atonement.
Oh, definitely. The ritual wasn't just about the sacrifice itself, but about the whole process of purification. The sprinkling of blood, the burning of the fat, the separation of certain parts of the animal, it's all a symbol of cleansing and purification, not just of the person, but of the community as a whole.
And it wasn't just the physical actions that were important, it was the heart behind them. The priests were the ones tasked with making sure the rituals were performed properly, but there was also an expectation that the people coming to make offerings were sincere, right?
Absolutely. That's a really key point. The act of offering something valuable wasn't just a mechanical action. It was an expression of repentance and humility, and the priest's role was to guide that person through the process, ensuring that it wasn't just a symbolic gesture, but a real effort to restore one's relationship with God.
I can see how this system might seem alien to modern eyes. The whole animal sacrifice thing doesn't really fit into our understanding of atonement today. But when you think about it in terms of a culture where animals were so closely tied to life and survival, it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. The sacrifice of something valuable like an animal would have been a significant loss for anyone. So it wasn't just the act, it was also the cost, which helped make the repentance real. It wasn't cheap grace, it required effort.
And speaking of cost, Leviticus 5 also makes a provision for those who can't afford a lamb for the offering. Instead, they could offer turtle doves, pigeons, or even just a small amount of flour. It's kind of amazing that the system was designed to be accessible, regardless of someone's economic status.
It really speaks to the inclusiveness of the law. God was making a way for everyone, regardless of their means, to participate in the process of restoration and reconciliation. It wasn't about what you could afford, it was about the heart behind the offering.
That's such a great insight. It's like the system was designed to honor the intention, not just the material sacrifice. And the peace offerings were another expression of this, right? Those were all about gratitude and fellowship, as opposed to atonement.
Exactly. Peace offerings were more celebratory in nature. If you had a successful harvest or something positive happened, you could offer peace offerings as an act of thanksgiving. And it was also a communal experience. Everyone ate the meal together, symbolizing peace and unity.
It's interesting, though, that there were rules around the leftovers from peace offerings. Anything left over after the day of the sacrifice had to be burned. It makes you think about how sacred the whole process was. They didn't just treat it casually.
That's a good point. It really speaks to the idea of holiness and respect for what's been offered. There's an order to it, a sanctity. Every part of the sacrifice was treated with reverence because it wasn't just a meal. It was a sacred act, a connection to God.
And then, of course, there's the prohibition against eating fat or blood. That's something that really stands out. Why do you think God made such a big deal about that?
There's a lot of speculation, but I think it comes down to the idea of purity and holiness. Blood especially symbolizes life, and fat, in the context of offerings, was considered the best part of the animal, something to be reserved for God alone. It's about giving God the best and recognizing that He alone is the source of life.
That's a powerful image. The best parts of the animal, which represent life itself, being given to God. It's like a reminder that He's the giver of all things, and that there's nothing too precious that shouldn't be offered back to Him in gratitude.
Exactly. And when you think about the broader context of Leviticus, all these offerings and laws are about restoring order to a broken world. They're a way of pointing the Israelites back to holiness, to God's standards, and to the reality that sin disrupts that order.
Which brings us full circle to where we started, atonement. The whole sacrificial system is a way to bridge the gap between a holy God and a sinful people. It's not just about rules, it's about restoring relationship.
Exactly. It's a deeply relational system. It wasn't just about rules for the sake of rules. It was about keeping the relationship intact. And that's something that transcends time, right? The need for atonement and restoration still resonates today.
It definitely does. And I think it's a reminder that no matter how much we try to do right, there's always a need for grace. And that grace, in this case, was symbolized through the offerings and sacrifices. A lot to think about for sure.
Definitely. Well, I think that wraps up our deep dive into Leviticus chapters 5 through 7. It's a tough topic, but a really interesting one. Thanks for walking through it with me.
Anytime. Always a pleasure to dive into these deep texts and see what they have to offer us. God bless.